Emily Damari, who survived 471 days in captivity, says the move risks rewarding terror and prolonging the conflict. Daniel Bett is from the British Jewish organisation Yakad, which is working towards a peaceful resolution in the Middle East. She told LBC she has no choice but to remain optimistic.
Conflicts have been solved in the past. People have reconciled their differences in the past when it has seemed impossible. And I think that if you do look at the fact that, yes, it may be a minority, but still there are people whose families were killed on October 7th and people in Gaza who lost loved ones on October 7th, and they are able still to talk about resolutions and peace, then we have to have that hope.
A 20-year-old man has been found guilty of assaulting 2 female police officers at Manchester Airport. Mohammed Fahir Amaz broke PC Lydia Ward's nose and also knocked PC Ellie Cook to the ground in July last year. The jury was unable to reach a verdict on a second charge of assault against him and his brother, 26-year-old Mohammed Ahmed. Both say they were acting in self-defence. Donald Trump's been branded a liar by Jeffrey Epstein's brother for playing down his relationship with the convicted sex offender. The US president is facing growing pressure to stick to his word and release files related to Epstein, following reports his name appears in the documents. The White House claims that's fake news. Mark Epstein, who's been speaking to our sister station, LBC News, says that's the mark of a desperate person.
I understand a lot of people distance himself from Jeffrey. He was charged, with crimes that people don't want to be associated with. And I understand that, but the lies, that's a little bit much, especially when they're so provable that they're lies. It becomes laughable.
And tens of thousands of people have turned out in Birmingham to pay their final respects to Ozzy Osbourne. His wife Sharon and their children Amy, Jack and Kelly stopped on the Black Sabbath Bridge to look at tributes during a procession through the city earlier. In the city, the FTSE 100 has closed unchanged at 91.36. The pound buys $1.32 and €1.15. LBC weather, rain moving into the south and west tonight, showers further north with lows of 12 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm James Kitchen.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. Cross Question with Iain Dale.
Hello, very good evening and welcome to Wednesday's Cross Question. I'm Iain Dale. On the panel with us tonight, we have Will Hutton, political economist, former editor of The Observer and now writes for them as a columnist. Next to him is Natasha Devon, LBC presenter, Saturdays 6 to 9, am I right?
You are correct, yeah.
It's so good when I get something right because I get so much wrong. Jonathan Gullis, former Conservative MP, we'll find out what he's up to in a moment. And Zoe Strimpel is a columnist for the Sunday Telegraph. They are, of course, here to take your calls on 0345 6060 973. You can WhatsApp us on that number or you can text 84850. And we'd love you to watch us on Global Player or the LBC app purely so you can see the colour of Natasha's dress. Because it's quite something.
0345 6060 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850. Cross Question with Iain Dale. This is LBC.
Right, let's go to a text question from Florence in Greenwich. Florence asks, would it be a moral failure if the UK does recognise a Palestinian state while Israeli civilians are still being held hostage within what Britain would consider to be that state's borders? Jonathan?
The simple answer is yes, as far as I'm concerned. I think whilst there is, of course, an argument to be made that long-term the destination should arrive, there is a two-state solution. I think that's the only way forward you'll ever secure proper, lasting peace. Hamas can never be part of the conversation. And what Sir Keir Starmer announced the other day, for me, was a capitulation to Hamas in those negotiations, ultimately putting very stringent rules on Israel and what they need to do in terms of demands, but nothing on Hamas, who are still holding over 50 hostages.
Well, he did say they had to release the hostages.
Well, he didn't say that was a condition. He made it clear that regardless, there would be a recognition of the state of Palestine in September's meeting, and I think of the United Nations. And I think that's a terribly bad thing. And Emily Damari today, obviously a victim who was kept for 471 days, has rightly come out and had a go at it. And I fully stand with her. I think this is the wrong thing to be doing at this moment in time. The only way that we'll see peace is Hamas agree to not just return the hostages, but cease any control of Gaza.
Do you not think the other condition would have... Well, not that Keir Starmer set this, but the only way a two-state solution is going to come about is if Hamas are effectively eliminated in whatever way, but also that Benjamin Netanyahu is not Prime Minister of Israel.
Yeah, totally agree. Benjamin Netanyahu is a blocker to peace. I think it's quite abundantly clear that will come an election in Israel, he will not be able to form a coalition government.
I'm not sure that is the case anymore. A year ago, I would have agreed with you. But I think the longer he stays in power as a war leader, he might well be able to persuade people, look, I've taken you through this, and all of the criticism that he had right at the beginning will seem a long way away.
I think with all wars there's fatigue, and I think we've seen quite large demonstrations now on the streets of Tel Aviv, for example, against the prolonging of this war. And Benjamin Netanyahu is only being propped up, let's not forget, by the very hard right in the Israeli government. And even they seem at some stage that they're going to pull the rug from under his feet. The moment that happens, I think he'll be on the way out. And of course, he's got his own legal consequences that he's got to face at some stage as well.
Natasha?
I think the moral failing is that we have failed to recognise the Palestinian state up until this point. 147 of the 193 UN countries recognise Palestine currently. For some reason, we're waiting until September. To put that into context, in the past 24 hours in Gaza, 113 people have died. Almost 650 people have been injured. Children are starving. There are 32 days to go until September. Why doesn't Keir Starmer do something now?
Yeah, but that wouldn't affect how many people are being killed, would it?
It wouldn't, but Palestinians have a right to a state, and it shouldn't be contingent upon the actions of Benjamin Netanyahu's government.
The trouble is, in saying there should be a state, and I've always supported the Palestinian state, but nobody's talking about what the borders would be. And people say, oh, well, we can wait for that. How can you recognise a state when you don't even know what it'll look like?
People talk about the 1967 borders, don't they? And I think that that's a good starting point for negotiation. But ultimately, a two-state solution is going to be a tricky process. There's a reason why it hasn't happened up until this point. But you cannot have a two-state solution if you don't recognise one of the states that's involved.
Will?
Well, I think talking about moral failures, I mean, there's so many multiple moral failures. Another moral failure is, what's happening to people queuing for food at these distribution sites, and so many getting killed. But I think we are at a big moment. Either there's going to be some kind of comprehensive deal involving the whole of the Middle East, in which there's an accommodation to be figured out between Israel and whatever autonomous kind of jurisdiction you can imagine that the Palestinians might have, or essentially the Middle East becoming a kind of greater Israeli prosperity sphere, or attempted prosperity sphere, kind of in which the rules of engagement are entirely set by Israel. And actually, I mean, the truth of the matter is that Britain is a bystander on this, and actually what Starmer proposed is a kind of step-by-step attempt to have some leverage jointly with the French. And it is very conditional. I mean, if there's still, to your questioner's point, if there are still hostages in Gaza in September, then recognition will not proceed, as I understand it. So, I think that there's a big choice. And the hope is that actually the Americans will actually kind of lean in to a comprehensive kind of peace settlement for the region. If not, we could face decades of kind of internal conflict.
I'm just trying to think what a peace conference would look like, who the participants would be. Obviously, you've got to have Israel as a participant. Obviously, you've got to have Palestinians, but in what form? Who else is there? America, presumably? I mean, it's quite difficult to think how it would come about.
If not that, what? I mean, you're just going to. I think the situation is, everybody kind of walks up to it and is kind of baffled by what to do. I mean, the Israelis obviously have some right on their side. I mean, a lot of right on their side, given what the disaster what happened. I mean, everyone abhorrent. And then equally, what's happened, particularly I think since the ceasefire broke down. I mean, the last 2 or 3 months have been very tricky for all of us to watch. Even Donald Trump has acknowledged that actually it's got to stop. I mean, if not something like this, what?
Yeah. Okay.
Nothing?
Zoe?
Well, it probably won't surprise you to know that I do think it is a moral failing, but I mean, where do you even begin with the moral failings about appeasement of people who want Israel's full destruction, which is really what a lot of it adds up to, as opposed to genuine concern for the suffering of not only Palestinians, but all who are, being decimated or suffering in wars around the world. But we see how selective people's concern is with that. And I think that the optics of it, and the reason a lot of people aren't sort of so convinced by the fine print, is that certain people, me, who have a lot of family in Israel and whose children are they wonder every day if their 18-year-olds are going to live another day they're fighting. It's not fun for them either. There is a sense that the horror of October 7th has not faded, and that this is a form of a reward to Hamas. I mean, if you just zoom out, October 7th, which was Hamas's undertaking, and everything they've done since then, and they knew the whole time that Israel would retaliate, and that they've said repeatedly that they don't care about their civilians. We know they don't with human shields. We know they don't with their infrastructure of terror, the tunnels, using hospitals, using schools. So, I mean, that's what it looks like to a lot of us. I think that the recognition of the state is just empty virtue signaling. It's not going to happen at this point. I mean, in the end, of course, that would be the outcome one would desire. But I mean, if anyone here has been to Israel since October 7th, even the most peace-loving kibbutzniks from the south who hate Benjamin Netanyahu can just tell you there's no way in heck they are having a Palestinian state encroaching that close, given what's still unresolved. So that's just not going to happen. So it's empty virtue signaling. I think what I find concerning about why Starmer is sort of jumping on this bandwagon is, who is he trying to appease, really? Since it's going to be completely pointless in the end, geopolitically, as I say, it's gestural. And what's new? We all know that most people are pretty anti-Israel. I mean, even so, okay, great. Joining Macron, the UN on this, et cetera, et cetera. But who's he trying to appease? Who are the constituents in the electorate that he is trying to appease by this? And I think that's what concerns me, because...
Well, if he's trying to appease people in his own party and sort of throw them a bit of a morsel, if he doesn't then recognise Palestine in September, he's got an even worse problem.
Yeah, I just think we need to. Why is Israel and Palestine? I mean, these are foreign entities that are not domestically entirely urgent relevance. Yes, there are some intermingled funding. There are some, export licenses that people object to. It's really small fry, and it is the way that this particular Russia, Ukraine, nobody cares anymore. Like, there's many other conflicts going on right now. China, nobody cares, at least not in this way. We don't see China governing, threatening to split a party, do we?
Let's just bring in Mohammed Imbarnes into the conversation, because he's got a relevant point to make. Mohammed, hi.
Hi, Ian. Thanks for having me on your show again. I've heard what Zoe said with interest as well, actually, and and what your other callers have said, and Nick especially earlier today. I just wanted to make a point that when the whole thing happened between Iran and Israel, and Donald Trump stepped in to sort of broker a peace deal between two nations diplomatically, he was quite fair in his criticism when that deal that he brokered fell apart, and he said, quote, I'll leave out the profanity, I'm dealing with two countries who don't know what the F they're doing. Now, what makes us think, that Keir Starmer could do any better? And the other point I want to make is, I think Keir Starmer is really just political posturing to now realise the tides have turned, and he's probably trying to win back favour of the British Muslim community and the grassroots Labour community in the UK.
Do you think he's that cynical?
Yes.
Well, he's neither here nor there. I mean, he came on LBC saying, Israel has the right to withhold water, gas, power, electricity and the works. And then later on, when he was challenged on it, he then let out a statement to almost say, no, that's not what I said. I said something completely different. Do you see what I mean? So it's like he's got one foot here and one foot there. I mean, at least be brave, you know what I mean? Stand up for your rights.
All right.
Stand up for what you have to say. And this political posturing, I mean, I don't buy it. I think it's a little too late is what some people are saying. Too little, too late.
I just want to contest this.
Okay, Mohammed, let's hear from Will Hutton.
Thank you.
I just think that the idea that political leaders kind of trying to keep their coalition together is kind of instantly something one should condemn. is kind of for the birds. I mean, this is what political parties are. They're coalitions, and actually the art of politics is crafting positions from conflicting positions, or you hope complementary positions, to get somewhere. I mean, the ultimate kind of person who does that is Netanyahu himself.
Well, you wouldn't want to have his coalition, would you?
I mean, Trump tries to keep his coalition together. It's what happens in democratic politics.
But Netanyahu's not doing it based on what should happen in Britain or Ireland or anything. That's what's so strange to me.
I think the reason that British people feel an affinity with that part of the world is firstly because Britain was so instrumental in the creation of Israel. They're our ally. We continue to supply them with arms. We continue to train IDF.
Very small scale.
Soldiers, sure, but we are involved to the extent that David Lammy is very keen to emphasise during a recent podcast on Global that we are not complicit in what's increasingly being called a genocide in Gaza. Can I just say, with that genocide word,
that does have to be pushed back on, because that is a highly partisan description, and actually experts who look at this and who are on the ground, who've done real research, it is a very contested, inflammatory term. Yes, it's very mainstream, but I just want to say there is another view.
But there are also experts who say that it's legitimate.
But it's also contested. I just want to say it is. Yeah.
Okay, well, on that note of kind of agreement, we will move on to another subject. It's 17 minutes past 8.
Weekdays from 7 a.m.
You've been humiliated beyond all belief.
Straight to the point.
Just pull the plug. There's no conversation to be had here.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
It's got worse. What is the problem they've got over there?
Listen on Global Player or the new LBC app. Download it now from your app store. LBC. Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC. Text 84850.
19 minutes past 8. We have with us in the studio Jonathan Gullis, former Conservative MP. Now, what are you up to now, Jonathan? Because the last time we talked, I think you thought about going back into teaching, and they wouldn't have you.
So I'm working now for the Centre for Social Justice part-time as a senior fellow. We're doing a big research project around access.
Are there any junior fellows?
Technical. I hope not. So because I certainly don't want to be demoted. But doing that obviously with the Centre for Social Justice around technical education, specifically looking at Andy Burnham's amazing Greater Manchester Baccalaureate and how to actually improve educational pathways other than the traditional academic routes, and we hope to have a report out in the autumn which we look at the state of the nation and call out some of the really good things the Conservatives did, but also, quite frankly, the continuation of the Blair legacy of 50% need to go on to university, albeit in the guise of what we call the English Baccalaureate. So we'll be I'm not holding my punches there. And then got my own little consultancy called it Aegean Consultants, where I spend a lot of my time talking to businesses who want to engage with Labour and reform. They don't really want to yet talk to the Conservative Party, although I'm urging them it's a good thing to do. But
oh dear. Will Hutton is here, political economist, columnist for The Observer and also its former editor. What's it like writing for a newspaper that used to edit? I'd find that really frustrating.
Oh, I edited it 30 years ago.
I know.
You are it feels like another world, you know.
You are one of its more famous editors, though.
I'm keen on the current editor, actually, James Harding. I know that sounds kind of, we're going to sucking up to current entities. I like the way that I like this Observer. I think that it's kind of it's got some energy, it's got some inquisitiveness, and actually I find it stimulating. So I kind of I look back at my own efforts, and they seem like in another world. It's in the last century, for Christ's sake.
Well, I love the New Observer because they got Mary Beard to write a positive review about my Margaret Thatcher book. So I thought, if they can do that, excellent. Zoe Strimpel is here, columnist for the Sunday Telegraph, and Natasha, Devon, LBC presenter. Right, Emma is in Bristol. She has a text question. If a judge finds that the Home Secretary was wrong to label Palestine Action a terror group, should she resign? Now, a bit of background to this. The High Court has today approved an application by a co-founder of Palestine Action for a judicial review into the prescription of the group, which is set to take place in September. Judges will look into whether Yvette Cooper acted within her legal powers when putting forward the measures to have the group labelled as a terrorist organisation. Zoe Strimpel.
Well, they broke into a military facility and caused, hundreds of millions of pounds of... this was an act of terror, wasn't it?
Well, the argument is it was criminal damage, not...
No, but I thought it was also sabotage that amounted to...
It was expensive, about less than 10 million, I think. 7 to 10 million of damage. But
it was expensive. More. It was one of the planes. It was more than that.
It was 30 million.
Was that okay?
Yeah. But I think it was the way it was, going into sensitive stuff. I mean, that isn't just criminal damage. So I think that there was, I was quite surprised actually. But I mean, look, I find the evil that flows off of these Palestine liberation movements, which, by the way, have nothing actually to do with Palestine or liberation, but mostly to do with demonizing Israel and bordering on anti-Semitism all the time in incredibly hostile, scary, trope perpetuating ways. So I have no personal feeling about their right. I mean, they're very close to incitement from my Jewish perspective, for sure. What about... Should they be, if she's found to have labeled them wrong? No, I absolutely think in the kind of history of errors that top politicians have made who haven't had to pay any price whatsoever, this one seems actually to have been. I don't think so. And anyway, they're going to appeal it, and it's a whole thing, and it's great for them. It's all part of their kind of martyrdom appeal. Okay. Well, I don't know. I really can't stand that group. I think they're really sinister.
I think you made that clear.
Yeah.
Will?
I very much doubt that they'll win. I mean, British Secretaries of State have incredible plenipotentiary powers to do what they choose, and actually the kind of act gives her that discretion. I would be astonished if the courts fight against her. And actually, the bigger question is: are they really terrorists, or are they a protest group? And there's all of that. But actually, has she kind of acted within the kind of her capacities and competencies as they're legally defined? I think it would be very difficult to overturn it.
But if it was overturned, what should happen to her?
I rather agree with that. I mean, I think that, in the kind of league table of heinous crimes, this is, I don't think, kind of one of the top dozen. I mean, I think that, and it'll be appealed, and I'm not sure.
I wonder who's funding this judicial review, because they're not cheap, are they?
Open question.
A question of who funds all of this activism.
Well, I very much hope it's not the British taxpayer that's funding it. That was kind of my point, because I think that would be outrageous. I mean, if you're going to challenge something, you need to raise the money to do it.
They probably have a lot of funders, right?
Well, I've no idea.
Natasha. I mean, I think we have to ask the question. Not any shade on the caller who has texted in, but the more pertinent question is, are we heading in the same direction as America here? Because I saw a video recently on social media that was verified of a person who was protesting in Kent. They had a Palestinian flag and they had a sign that said, Israel is committing genocide. Now, I know that is a contested term, but 60,000 people, 18,500 of which have been children, have died since October the 7th, 2023. And the police rocked up and said, we have enough evidence based on this sign and the Palestinian flag to arrest you for supporting Palestine Action. So are we getting to a stage now where anybody who advocates for Palestinians, anyone who says free Palestine, anyone who flies a Palestinian flag can be arrested.
I really think that the problem we have is actually the mirror image, the inverse of that, which is that everywhere you go now, there's incredibly there's anti-Semitic slogans. There's a hostile environment for Jews. Jews are targeted in the course of all of this anti-Israel stuff. Palestinian flags, keffiyehs, they are so numerous. The people who can't
but how is it
who can't even risk themselves
flag anti-Semitic?
The whole movement is linked to terror glorification, to...
But you can't arrest people for just
I'm not saying you can, but I'm saying if this is a one-off, do you know that a woman who went to Israel came back and was visited by the police because she'd been referred to Prevent for having just visited Israel, so they worried she'd been radicalized. I really don't think a singular incident... The protests we've seen since October 7th, which the police, the two-tier justice that has emerged from that, I'm sorry, but the problem is not that people cannot wave Palestinian flags. There are Palestinian flags all over the place. The problem is that Jews do not feel safe to even wear Stars of David out anymore.
Well,
that is the problem. So I don't think...
Sorry,
I need to say one more thing.
No, you're not going to blunderbuss your way through again. You've done enough of that so far.
Then don't invite a Jew who's a Zionist onto your show to talk about these things, Iain. No, I'm sorry. I'm the only one in here with skin in the game. And this comes...
No.
You said you were going to change topic, weren't we? It's interesting that Gaza remains... Yeah, there I go again.
Please, just respect the rules. In a debate, other people have a right to have a say too.
Other people have had a say, and they will have a say.
Not as much as you have,
no, but you just are shutting me up, which you wouldn't do to anyone else.
I'm not shutting you up. I'm asking you not to be a blunderbuss and try and shout over people. That's all I'm asking you to do. That is my role as host of the show. And if you can't respect that, there is an alternative. Natasha.
That's fine. Take the alternative.
But may I just say that I come into this studio every Saturday to do my show. That means I walk through central London and I see a lot of protests, and I have seen all of the Palestinian protests. One of the biggest blocks in the Palestinian protests is the Jewish bloc. People waving Stars of David. Yeah. People saying, as a Jewish person, I cannot support what is happening in Gaza. They are showing more respect than the other blocs. Now, I'm not saying that anti-Semitism does not exist on those marches. I have never seen it, and I've seen every single one of those protests, although I haven't participated. And I just wanted to add that as a counter to what you were saying.
No, Yvette Cooper shouldn't resign. She's done the right thing, and they are a terrorist organisation. You break into a UK military base, you should be grateful you got off without being shot, to be perfectly frank, and that's what I'd want our armed forces to be doing if you break in to a military facility. What they did is an act of sabotage, and if the Russians did it, for example, then we would call that terrorism. So why would we not call it terrorism for those who are fighting for a cause which is really, and I agree with Zoe, just some sort of cult following at the moment with the hate marches that we see on the streets of our capital week in, week out, which is exhausting not just for the British public to continue to see, but exhausting for police forces up and down the country having to continually supply their officers out of their communities into London in order to make sure that we have some cause of some sort of ability to...
I am leaving because I was invited to by an alternative. I don't appreciate being insulted and told I'm a blunderbuss for being someone who's invited on to talk about Israel. You should apologise to me if you want me to stay on.
Well, I'm sorry if you took offence at what I said.
I think the way you talked to me was completely unacceptable.
It wasn't meant.
Given that I'm making,
it wasn't meant to be offensive. All I was asking you is to let other people have a say.
You're completely misrepresenting.
I'm happy. Look, I don't.
Do you want me to stay on?
I absolutely want you to stay on.
Because I don't think you should cut someone off who is the only guest here for whom this is actually personally relevant.
Well, I'd like to.
Isn't that the case?
I'd like to give you the. Well, I think everyone feels
really.
That they're
other people have
this.
Jewish family in Israel. Other people are just from Holocaust survivors. Other people.
I've been a massive supporter of Israel over all of this.
So then I think you should rethink how you talk to someone who talks about Israel. Would you like to have a final
word on this?
Yeah, I just think this is not the first time I've been incredibly rudely talked about when I talk in a heated fashion about Israel. And let me tell you that the way I talk about Israel is a fraction of the aggression with which the pro-Palestine bunch talk about it absolutely all the time. And it is not easy being a Jewish woman in an environment like the British media landscape and speaking out in defense of Israel. And then, I don't need it. I have a babysitter at home right now. I've come out because I enjoy your show, and I really didn't expect to be talked to like that by you.
I'm sorry if you took it the wrong way. I didn't mean it.
It wasn't the wrong way. It was how you talked to me.
I know what I meant, and I didn't mean it in that way.
It'd be nice if on a British show about politics, one other topic than Israel might actually enter the fray.
Well, it will do. The next question. I can guarantee it. It's 8:30. Let's go to the news headlines with James Kitchen.
Technical problems at the National Air Traffic Control Centre have caused huge disruption to flights taking off from the UK. Officials say the system is now fully operational, although backlogs are expected for some time. A British-Israeli woman held hostage by Hamas has called Sir Keir Starmer's plan to recognise a Palestinian state a moral failure. Emily Damari, who survived 471 days in captivity, says the move risks rewarding terror and prolonging the conflict. And a 20-year-old man has been found guilty of assaulting two female police officers at Manchester Airport. Mohammed Fahir Amaz broke PC Lydia Ward's nose and also knocked PC Ellie Cook to the ground in July last year. LBC weather, rain moving into the south and west tonight, showers further north with lows of 12 degrees.
LBC. Cross Question with Iain Dale. Watch live on both Global Player and the new LBC app.
It's 8:33 on LBC. With us on the panel today, Jonathan Gullis, former Conservative MP, Natasha Devon, LBC presenter, Zoe Strimpel, columnist for the Sunday Telegraph, and Will Hutton, a political economist and columnist for The Observer. Let's go to a text question from Rick in London. Another around 600 people have crossed the Channel and entered the UK illegally today. Labour has levers it can pull to prevent this, but apparently refuses to use them. Externally and internally, is the UK now signing its own death warrant by failing to tackle illegal immigration? Will Hutton.
Well, I find this kind of language of immigration extravagant. I mean, I don't think that we're signing a death warrant. I do think that we have to do something. I think that my favoured approach to this is actually, I think, and have long advocated, that there should be a national system of ID cards, and we should know who's here. And if you arrive and, without an ID card, you can't get work. And that this whole notion of actually kind of the country being wide open to anybody is kind of could be acted on. And I don't think it's that easy to stop these boats crossing the Channel. I mean, Nigel Farage talks about towing them back to France. I don't see that. The French government can just turn back. Endless boats crossing the Channel. I mean, we if you're going to get at this, we have to kind of make it clear to those who want to come here that there are rules of the game, and we're going to insist on them.
Jonathan.
Look, Iain, you know me on this topic. Illegal migration is a travesty to this nation. It's rightfully what cost the Conservative Party and people like me their parliamentary seats, and were hounded out of office for the failure to do the basic thing of controlling our sovereign borders. These are predominantly, overwhelmingly young single men in the age of 18 up to 39, many of whom, or a lot of whom, will have medieval attitudes when it comes towards women and how they perceive how women should be treated and how they should act, as well as obviously coming and fueling criminality. Let's not forget that we're seeing more and more cases where, in Baroness Casey's audit, these illegal migrants are showing up in child rape gangs. We've seen The Sun call out the fact that these migrants are going into stores like Liberty in central London and thieving and shoplifting using tinfoil lined bags. We're also seeing, obviously, the black market when it comes to Just Eat, Uber Eats and other delivery drivers earning up to £1,000 a week in some cases, as well as obviously then working in the drug trade and black market too. So Keir Starmer is going to live and die when it comes to this politically by whether he indeed delivers on his promise to smash the gangs, which the only thing he's managed to do is smash the records with a near 50% now increase on small boat arrivals in 2025 compared to 2024. It is time to be dramatic and drastic. It is time to detain and deport on a mass scale and take inspiration for what Donald Trump has done, where he obviously had zero illegal crossings over the month of May.
So are you about to join Reform?
Well, I think these are things I've said.
You've just spent a couple of minutes there espousing reform policy.
Well, these are things I espoused when I was a Member of Parliament, that is fully on the record and said in studios like this when I was still a Member of Parliament too. I'm still angry deeply at my own party for failing to deliver on its promise to stop the boats. And it was because we weren't radical enough, and people like me rebelled on that last Rwanda bill because we said clearly that the government had to go further than it ever had done before when it came to completely ignoring the European Court of Human Rights, as well as carving out sections of the Human Rights Act to allow us to stop the judicial activism and get these people deported. Let's not forget, Sir Keir Starmer was one of those, along with Shabana Mahmood, our Justice Secretary, who signed letters saying that foreign national offenders, for example, shouldn't be deported to Jamaica, some of whom then obviously went on to commit other crimes. He has zero credibility when it comes to dealing with illegal migration. His own government doesn't have a clue on what they're trying to do. And as I say, it is a serious danger to the safety and security of our nation, and to particularly to our women and girls, to have these amount of young men in our country roaming the streets.
Natasha?
I can't believe that you sit there and claim to have any kind of concern for the safety of women and girls, and in the same monologue praised Donald Trump, an adjudicated rapist, self-confessed sex offender who's trying to take away bodily autonomy from women in the United States, who is being welcomed for a second state visit next month. You cannot have it both ways. The reason that it is mostly young men that we see making that dangerous trip across the channel is because they come here first, and then they try and gain asylum, and then they send for the women and children who can come here safely.
They don't come here first, do they, though? They come to Italy, they come to Greece, then they travel through Central Europe, then they come to France.
There is no law
Keir Starmer's done a deal which creates a safe and legal route from France, which will drag more people to the French border, which will mean that if they... 96
You're talking over each other.
Apologies.
I'm sorry. There is absolutely no law that says that they have to stay in the first safe country they arrive to. They may have family here, they may speak English, there may be other reasons why they specifically want to come to Britain, and Britain should take our share. Now, if the Labour government properly invested in the asylum system, made that more efficient so that we didn't have these very expensive hotels, so that we could quickly determine who is legitimate and who is not, and yes, deport those people who are illegitimate, absolutely, but the rest of the people can pay taxes, contribute to society the way that the majority of people who make that perilous journey want to do. And it's incredibly irresponsible, I think, to paint them all somehow as sex offenders.
They didn't say all. I said there'll be a large cohort of those young men who have medieval mindsets towards women.
A large cohort
of those men, yes, those young fighting age men who are coming over on small boats. And it is a very dangerous thing indeed that these men are coming over. And Baroness Casey's own audit said they are showing up when it comes to child rape gangs more and more when it comes to those police records, where the police are keeping records. We see the criminality that's following.
Do you not have to watch your language here a bit? Because words have consequences. And if you try and make out that a large cohort, by which I'm assuming you mean sort of getting on for half or even over half, are likely to be potential sex offenders...
or criminals.
Then, well, I mean, that makes it even worse, doesn't it? Because there's no evidence for that. Yes, there have been arrests and charges brought and convictions made against some people who've come over on small boats. You're absolutely right on that. But to try to label all of them or a large cohort of them in that way, I mean, I think that's quite incendiary.
Well, you can think that, and others will get offended, I'm sure, with their faux outrage online. I'm talking what is going on in places like Stoke-on-Trent, which were the 5th largest voluntary contributors to the asylum dispersal scheme previously, which saw us have over 1,200 illegal migrants in our city, and we're to the point where we had a 1 in 30 ratio in a Truro-in-Hanley ward, the city centre, well above the 1 in 200 ratio that is meant to be the absolute floor when it comes to the Home Office's own data. And in that particular ward, what's the highest highest, what we see. It's the highest for violence and sexual offences. It's the highest for theft. It's the highest for shoplifting. It's the highest for antisocial behaviour. Again, Stoke-on-Trent is constantly used and abused by successive governments and Serco when it comes to dumping people in our city because we have a cheaper private rental housing stock as well as hotels.
Zoe?
Well, I do think there's a risk of dehumanising people, which doesn't behoove those of us who want, culturally to have the moral kind of high ground, I suppose. I think the problem is there's a mixture of truths in all of these perspectives. So, yes, there are cultural differences in the and problems that come from the demographic that comes on the boats and is just here seeking asylum, but without evidence, then obviously I would not want to say that the majority are kind of criminals or anything, but I think that there are cultural differences and problems and some tendencies that are worrying, and the problem we have is a complete failure to assimilate or insist on assimilation. So if we had a robust assimilation, a robust belief in who we are, and minorities and immigrants could be well integrated, then actually I think immigration in itself can be like a very revitalizing force, and it doesn't matter where people are from. If they want to come here and they want to be British and they want to pay the tax, et cetera, then they can really be fantastic. The problem we have is that the conversation is just kind of stupid on all fronts. So on one hand, we have this kind of all-encompassing, they're all terrible, which can't be true. But then we have Starmer kind of encouraging, continuing to encourage a lack of transparency in the way we talk about the actual issues. So people get more and more angry and the conversation gets more and more polarized. So in terms of the actual, clearly there is a problem right now with unvetted migrants coming in this way. It's a problem for taxpayers, it's a problem for communities, and it's a problem for the national conversation.
I think it's interesting what you say about integration, because generally I think in this country we've had quite a good record of integration. But when you have, whether it's legal or illegal migration, in the numbers that we've had in the last few years, that is when, for whatever reason, communities do feel threatened. And the problem for politicians is trying to work out how to address that when they're the ones that have allowed the situation to come about.
But I think there's also a problem, isn't there, with the way certain... the policing, for instance. We know now that there have been things that haven't been properly policed out of fear of, getting it wrong. Sensitivities, saying the wrong thing. And that has really serious consequences. And I think that, again, this comes down to what are the things that are not allowed to be discussed frankly. And, things that are, come out of mosques, for instance, communities that don't necessarily want to integrate, people who come here and mean us harm and don't want to kind of work and contribute and all that stuff. And there has to be a way of, being able to discuss both. I just think we're going to see more and more rioting and fury and reform growing until it stops being completely verboten to say certain things.
Can I just remind people that Nigel Farage described himself as part of a similar phenomenon to the misogynistic influencer Andrew Tate. I watched a lengthy interview with Richard Tice in which he sought to downplay the fact that one of their 5 MPs had been arrested for repeatedly kicking his former girlfriend. The idea that the reform movement cares about the safety and dignity of women, and that's the reason they speak so much about immigration, is offensive, laughable, for the birds, in the words of Will.
But I think we would take the air out of that movement if it was okay to have real, honest conversations about people's concerns and fears. And also the cultural problems that sometimes come with these men who come from ultra-conservative societies. But we can't, everyone is petrified. And as I say, I think that's crept into the policing culture. And then that isn't, that's even worse for communities.
Do you think there's a danger that, there's been a lot of talk about a summer of discontent and this conversation sort of slightly reflects it, where we're in danger of talking ourselves into a summer of riots?
No, I don't think so.
There were recent statistics as well. In one constituency, 68% of the people that were arrested for rioting had been reported for domestic abuse. Across the entire country, 41% of the people who were arrested for rioting had been reported for domestic abuse. If we care about the safety of women, we care about the safety of women, but it has to be consistent, not just when a brown person is the perpetrator.
Natasha, those statistics that you've just used there, for example, if there are 100 people protesting, 10 are arrested, and then four scumbags who rightly deserve to be called out as scumbags, but 4 out of 100 is not representative of the majority of people in many places that we've seen in Epping, which are women
like
and mothers who are coming out.
Seekers.
Well, no, my statistics are based on what Cabaret Casey's been saying. But again, let's go back to Epping. In Epping, you've got a situation where mothers voluntarily went on a peaceful protest, and it was predominantly peaceful. Were there far-right agitators in there? Of course there were. Were there also the Antifa lot who come in balaclavaed up, looking for conflict in order to try and start a fight, and so they can get their pictures and portray everyone who's there as somehow being far right, and the lazy slogans of fascism and Nazism come out, when actually women in that case who were protesting after a girl, albeit I appreciate that the person in the hotel has claimed that they're innocent, was sexually assaulted. And when you talk about Nigel Farage and Richard Tice, that's for them to answer. What I say is, how can the Labour Party claim to be on the side of women and girls when they chose to vote against a national grooming gang inquiry and were embarrassed into doing it by Baroness Casey?
But I think an important point to make here is that everybody, when you're in a position of political leadership, and Nigel Farage is, you do have to be responsible for what you say. And when you accuse the Essex police force of bussing in counter-demonstrators, and then it's proved that you're talking a load of hogwash, you have to take responsibility for that. And that's the sort of thing that does, I think, wind people up. And I mean, if that had been true, I think people would have been right to be outraged.
The right to protest is a qualified right, not an absolute right. The Essex police knew, by allowing that counter-protest near those women who were fighting for the safety of women and girls, was likely going to cause some sort of friction.
They bust them in, or did they not?
Well, we see them being walked in, and the police are walking in alongside them, and then we see some being put in vans and driven out after the protest. But what's important to understand here is, again, it's a qualified right. The police could have said either the counter-protest happens further away from the Epping Hotel, or that protest happens at a later time to stop conflict. That was a decision by the Chief Constable of Essex Police.
Yeah, and the Police and Crime Commissioner for Essex I interviewed at length on Saturday morning and told me exactly what happened on that, and I think I prefer to believe his version of it.
I just want to quickly just come back on something Natasha said, about the fact that, we have a different standard for if it's a brown person who commits a sexual offence. I don't think that's necessarily the case, but I can understand why, when people have come over on a boat and they're not paying, they're just in hotels at the tune of the taxpayer, and they're not in,
undocumented,
and they're committing crimes. That is different from someone who's just already British and, not better or worse, but you can understand why people are like, okay. Now we're funding that.
I'm just going to say, great conversation, very intriguing actually, but I mean, what's wrong with the notion, and I floated at the beginning of it, actually there should be some system of ID cards. I mean, why can't we kind of identify who's here by obliging everyone to hold an ID card? I mean, I think there's substantive majority of...
I agree with you, Will, by the way. I agree with digital ID. I see it in Estonia. It works incredibly well. You can slim down the civil service because you're able to do a lot of what you want to do online, as they do. They barely have a local government civil service because you can do so much online. So Estonia is a great blueprint towards your digital ID.
It's not the British way.
But here's the problem, I think.
2 papers, please.
What's happening is we're trying to kind of deal with this at the same time as kind of respecting the British way, in your own words, but actually we have to kind of shift the conversation. If we're going to deal with the kind of emotive things that have been said in the last kind of 10 minutes, we've got to try and preserve, what's best about Britain, which is a certain liberality. And actually, I'm struck at how kind of in the main we get along with each other. I don't believe the society is broken. I'll be surprised if we have a kind of wave of riots this August. I could be wrong. And the crime stats show that crime has actually halved in the last 30 years. So it's a pretty good place still. Well, and we talk ourselves into this kind of corner of kind of, and if we wanted to kind of transform things, I think a kind of something like that I've just suggested would be a way of actually saying we're going to control our borders, we're going to know who's here, going to trust us.
Well, I think it goes back to what you were saying, Zoe, about integration, in that if you compare us with most other European countries, maybe not everyone, but most, I actually think we've done a pretty good job on that in the last 30 or 40 years. I mean, why is it that so many people want to come to this country rather than France? Not just because they can speak English, but because they know what the race relations are like in France. And I don't think I'm exaggerating on that. Anyway, listen, we do have to go to a break. But let me tell you, if you want to talk about any of the subjects we've just talked about, you can put your calls to Nigel Farage. He'll be there here in the studio with Nick Ferrari at breakfast to take your calls tomorrow morning from 7. It's 10 to 9.
This is LBC. Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
8:52. Oh, they're all talking. They're all talking. Shows we do all get along, really. Jonathan Gullis is here, former Conservative MP. Will Hutton, political columnist. Zoe Strimpel, columnist for the Sunday Telegraph. And Natasha, Devon, LBC presenter. Saturdays 6 to 9. If you are, by the way, waiting for a plane in an airport, do stay listening, because you'll be interested in our fun question at the end. I'm not sure how fun it is, but particularly if you are waiting in an airport. Right, Gemma in Southampton says, who will win between Wes Streeting and the doctors? Zoe.
Oh my God. It's a really interesting question. I think, I mean, I don't know who will actually win, but I think it's well established at this point that the doctors are going too far with this one. So I think what's more interesting to consider is where their whole kind of campaign is going to go. I mean, if they're going to keep going along these lines, I think the NHS is going to just...
Well, I don't know if you know this, but Wes Streeting has written an open letter to the BMA today in which he says the BMA will lose a war with this government and it's squandered the goodwill of ministers, adding that he never left negotiations prior to the weekend strike action they did. I'm not sure that's a very conciliatory letter.
Yeah, and I think the thing is that patients, of course, get completely left out of these conversations, and I think that when trust in doctors dissipates, then like you have a sort of psychological crisis as well, and then you kind of have the NHS, the thing that keeps it ticking despite all of its kind of manifold kind of fatal flaws, is that people still believe in it and they kind of stand by it and they love it. But this protest, I mean, strikes like this and this kind of direction of travel, especially coming from the younger doctors, which is sort of so unsympathetic at this point that you start to think, well, are people even going to think, well, it's our NHS and why should we save it now, because actually we don't trust the doctors. We don't know if we're going to get care. They care about their own pockets more than the Hippocratic Oath. So, I mean, I just don't think this particular strike is going to be it's a much more kind of existential issue.
Jonathan?
Look, I think if Wes Streeting continues with his firm line, I think he'll win, because he'll win the trust and the backing of the British people. I think he and Angela Rayner have been by far the government's most impressive ministers in this first year of a Labour government. And I think Wes has been absolutely right to call out the BMA and say, look, generosity, we've been there, we've given you that 23% pay increase. You know the financial pressures that we're under. Rachel Reeves is, I can only imagine what her summer must be like, trying to come up with the budget and a way of it not having to break any manifesto pledges. And so I think Wes just needs to hold the line. The polling shows that the public think this is now going too far, and I think it will lose a lot of sympathy and empathy with the British people. And dangerously for the BMA, will open the conversation about the funding model of the NHS if they carry on this way, because people will start saying, well, how do we get a different kind of service? So I think Wes Streeting, it won't help his political career that I've backed him, but keep going as you are, and I think the British people are with you.
Well, if you're in Edinburgh on Saturday, Jonathan, I don't know if you are, but you can come and see me interviewing Rachel Reeves on stage at the Edinburgh Fringe, and I shall I should pass you your sincere, comradely good wishes. Natasha?
I think it depends what you mean by win. I agree with what both of you have said, that the doctors, it doesn't look likely that they're going to get their pay rise, and the polling does show that the British public do not back this strike in the way that they have with strikes previously. However, not just Wes Streeting's position, this entire government have bet the house on the NHS being in a better state in 2029 than it is when they came into power. This is their big issue. And if this strike action continues because they can't reach a settlement, then ultimately Wes Streeting will lose.
Will?
I think Streeting is one of the most talented of the Labour politicians at the moment. I agree with Jonathan. I think he's a good politician, and I think he's sized up his chance. I don't think he'd come in so hard if he didn't think he had a good chance of winning. And so my hunch is that he's going to come out on top in this. Plainly, there's going to have to be some kind of deal, some kind of accommodation, but I think he's going to win.
Should it be about winning and losing? Because in the end, most wars end up in some sort of compromise.
No, absolutely not. No, it would be much better if the whole thing had never got to this pass. But having kind of the question being posed the way it's been posed, and we're asked to kind of say, what we've. We're asked to say win or lose. So we say,
I think the biggest frustration for the British people is that £2 in every £3 of additional funding that's gone into the NHS under this Labour government has gone to cover pay rises. It's not going to improve frontline services or increase neighbourhoods.
That had to happen.
But 20 billion out of 30 billion is a lot of money, and to see these strikes then continue when Keir Starmer rightly talks about returning neighbourhood hospitals or care in some cases, obviously wanting to improve social care, albeit I think Labour promised big in opposition. Now they're facing the reality there. They're going to have to come up with an answer on that question.
There was a case last year. It's a much diminished case in 2025.
Right, let's move on to our fun question for the end of the programme. I think we could all do with that, couldn't we? Max is in the South Terminal of Gatwick Airport. You can kind of guess what's coming, can't you? He says, lots of us are stuck in airport waiting rooms tonight after that air traffic control meltdown earlier on. When you suddenly have a long delay and nowhere to go, what's your favourite creative way of passing the time? Give me ideas, says Max. Natasha?
Audiobook would always be my thing of choice. I've just finished the most brilliant book. It's called Careless People by Sarah Wynne Williams. She is a whistleblower at Facebook. And when you're reading a book where you can't wait to go to bed to read your book. You can't wait for the day to be done, everything to be in its place so that you can go and read your book, because it's so page-turny. There are so many revelations in there that will make you not believe the callousness of these people that are in control of the social media companies. So get that downloaded would be my advice.
Does she mention Nick Clegg?
Yes.
Oh, I might read that. Jonathan?
I like to find a big group of people, create like a French bowls situation, and then get a load of the wheelie carry-on bags and see who can most accurately get to the pin, as it were, the centre ball with wheeling it down the aisles. I did that many a time when with university chums travelling, and you get a good enough crowd, good enough audience, a bit of cheering, and it certainly lightens the mood.
lad. Zoe.
Well, just to pick up on the book theme, I would go to the W.H. Smith books, which are always fantastic, weirdly, in airports. I think even Gatwick's South Terminal has one. I've gotten some absolutely great, unexpected, kind of mid-century Penguin edition, vintage, whatever, books from there. It's really worth a look. And if the delay goes on and on, you could get Gwyneth Paltrow's biography and start in on that, which I'm sure you're desperate to read.
That was not what I was expecting you to say.
Speaking of books you're looking forward to, I really, it is weirdly gripping. I mean, if you want to kind of understand the 21st century kind of culture of wellness and all that stuff, which you probably don't, but it's a nice long book about one of the most famous women of the century. So
okay,
that'll
I always talk to people. I get teased about it, but I mean, I just think stop scrolling on your iPhone, save your battery, because you never know, you could be there for another few more hours yet, and just talk to folk. I mean, I think it's.
Do they not think you're a weirdo?
Yeah.
In these situations, not, because you're thinking everyone's kind of facing this crisis. How long are we going to be stuck here? And actually, I find it endlessly fascinating just talking to folk.
Well,
it's the most diverting thing you can do.
I can't believe
Human
that none
contact.
of you have mentioned you could be listening to the Where Politics Meets History podcast.
I'm sorry,
I'm
Ian.
very disappointed in that, but anyway.
Or reading your book on Margaret Thatcher.
Thank you.
That's a good one.
And that is available as an audio book. There's summer audio listening for you, Natasha.
Jonathan, you are such a sucker.
Now, I should tell you, this is the last cross question until the 1st of September. We're taking a break in August. Just can't get the guests, frankly. So I hope you'll be returning to listening to us on the 1st of September. But, of course, the programme goes ahead throughout the whole of August. Now, coming up in the next hour, we are going to talk about... it's partly related to what we talked about last Thursday on the Online Safety Act, because it appears that Australia are going to ban 16-year-olds from watching YouTube. And I'm trying to get my head around that, because you can't watch porn on YouTube. It doesn't allow it. Whatever algorithm they have, it kind of works. And on YouTube, as well as entertaining, there's lots of sort of educational stuff on it. So why on earth would you do that? Are we getting to the point where we're just going a little bit over the top in what we think children should be allowed to do or watch or not? 0345 6060 973 is the number to call.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 9 o'clock. Airlines are attempting to restore their flight schedules after an air traffic control fault caused major disruption. Managers say systems are now fully operational following the technical glitch that grounded planes. The aviation expert Alex McCarris told LBC disruption could last a while.
So we know now that they've resolved the said issue. They haven't actually said what the issue was, and therefore flights are able to get underway. But just to put this into a bit of kind of context and perspective, this didn't last very long at all, and you have flights that are scheduled to depart from the Eastern Mediterranean tonight, now already delayed to tomorrow morning. That's how quick the knock-on effect is.
A British-Israeli woman who was held hostage by Hamas has accused Sakir Starmer of being on the wrong side of history. Emily Damari, who was in captivity for 471 days, says his plan to recognise